put them into the chat box. And also, if you would like to ask any questions, please just raise your hand and we will come over to you. There should be a bit of a time at the end for some Q&As, but please sit back and relax, and I'll hand over to Louise.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you all so much for coming along this evening. I know you probably had busy days trying to sort yourself out and kids out, and so really welcome you all along. My name's Louise Ryan. I'm a GP, and I've worked in and around Leicestershire for about 16 years as a GP now. I also lead on children's services locally, so helping to sort of plan and implement what happens for children in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. I've got a colleague on the call as well, one of my paediatrician colleagues, Dr. Imad Ahmed, who'll be joining the last part of the call and helping me to answer some of your questions. So I really do think of questions, pop them in the chat. We'll come to them all at the end, because I really want to be able to get to grips with what you want to know if I haven't covered it in the talk. Okay. So this is only an hour long, this webinar. We could talk about sleep for days, and in fact Imad is a sleep specialist and he does do that when he goes off to conferences and that stuff. Children's sleep is there's a lot to know about it and there's a lot to think about, but we're going to run through some of the basics to begin with and think about how we can potentially help some of you if you're struggling with your children's sleep. So just going to hopefully get my slide to move along. So I've told you who I am. I'm a doctor, I'm a GP, and obviously I deal with adults and children, but I'm also a mum, and that's me snuggling up with my two on the sofa. I'm a mum of two boys, one of whom sleeps incredibly well and one of whom doesn't sleep incredibly well. So I've been through some of this, so hopefully you'll probably hear as I talk my own experiences with this. It is really hard, really challenging, and I thought it was just me and what I was doing wrong until I had my second child who slept beautifully. So I'm going to bring a bit of my lived experience as well as my professional knowledge along with this as well. So we get a bit of science and a bit of the kind of art of what I do as a GP. So why are we talking about sleep? I mean, you're all here because potentially you would like some advice and some help with helping your child to sleep. But actually, we know as a system and as a local health service, we put out a survey to families, to children families and to health professionals last year. We got loads of feedback back from that survey. And sleep was one of the commonest things that people were worried about. So both, as well as children, their parents and carers and healthcare professionals, mental health was the top of the list, but sleep came a big second. And I know for sure in my local school, they did a survey recently about well-being and in my kids' primary school, and sleep came up as a big factor there as well. So we know that sleep is a big problem for people. And the real key here is just to remember, we've had, I'm not sure how many people will come this evening, but we've had over 150 people sign up to the webinar, which tells me that a lot of people want to know about this. So you're really not alone in this. I think you have to remember that sometimes as a parent, when your child isn't sleeping, you can feel really lonely. You can think, what am I doing wrong? Why me? What am I not getting right with my child? Why isn't this working? But the statistics show that 4 in 10 children experience sleep problems at some stage, and that rises to 8 in 10 if you're talking about children with special educational needs and disabilities. So there may be some of you on the call who are watching who, your child has got special educational needs, and this may be a big problem for you. All of the stuff I'm talking about applies to all children. So hopefully it will help some of you. And as I say, it was the commonest cause of one of the most common causes of concern in our survey across the whole sort of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So this advice that I'm giving is mostly, it really is directed at primary school age children. So obviously people have difficulty with their baby sleeping, and sometimes teenagers have trouble with, it's quite different, the advice for those age groups. But what I'm primarily focusing on is that 4 to 11 age group, primary school children. That's the age of my kids. They're both within primary school at the moment. Who I'm not, unfortunately, I had to get a Disney slide in there somewhere. Who I'm not is the fairy godmother, unfortunately. I wish I was. And so you'll hopefully recognise this is the fairy godmother from Cinderella. I don't have a magic wand. There is no easy quick fix to helping sleeping children. There's no magic pill, there's no magic potion, or no magic wand. It takes determination and perseverance, and it does take quite a bit of hard work from us as parents. So, you know, I'm not going to pretend and everything's easy, and you know, you listen to this webinar and you'll suddenly have a child who sleeps really well. You know, hopefully you can respect that I'm being quite honest with you all. I've had experience myself as a parent, so I know it's really hard and it will take hard work and determination, but you know, with this advice, hopefully it's going to help you all and your families as well. Okay, the advice I'm giving is based around research and science. So it's stuff that may seem to some of you who have already looked into this and had advice from various people. To some of you, some of this may seem quite obvious. To others, it may be stuff that you're thinking, well, how on earth could that work? I'm saying that it's based in research and science, and this is the best advice. This is the advice we give, you know, in general practice. It's the advice our school nurses give, our specialists and consultants. They give this advice as well. So hopefully it will resonate with some of you and it will provide you with some help. As I've said, managing sleep in children can be really overwhelming. It can affect the whole family. It can affect parents' well-being. It affects our sleep as parents, doesn't it? We're tired, we get frustrated, we get short-tempered, and we struggle to manage ourselves as we're navigating the sleep problems with our children. But it really does require consistency and determination to keep on track with things and to keep going. Nothing works, you know, you try it once, it doesn't work, it doesn't mean it's failed. It often requires that consistent approach to keep going. One of the things to remember is that sleep problems, if you keep doing the same thing and the sleep isn't improving, it's not going to get better if you just leave things as they are. You do need to change what you're doing, and you do need to put in some sort of interventions to make a difference and make a change for your child. Look after yourself through all this. You know, like I say, you're not alone with this. There's loads of families going through the same as you are, but perhaps people don't talk about it because people like to show you all the good stuff, don't they? On Instagram and Facebook, you'll see all the happy, smiley people, and you won't hear about the things that are going on behind closed doors, where people are, you know, children are crying and parents are crying and nobody's getting to sleep and everyone gets overwhelmed. But just try one thing at a time, keep consistent, plan what you're doing, and some of this advice will, you know, as I go on, it'll become clear what I'm talking about really. So why do we need to sleep? Obviously, you know, we need to rest, we understand that, but in terms of what happens medically and scientifically in our bodies, for children particularly, they need to sleep so that they can grow properly. It's the time when our body repairs itself and tissues start to regenerate and repair. It's really important for sleep regulation, and we know that people who are overweight or obese do find that it impacts on their sleep and vice versa. So having poor sleep affects your appetite and often makes you more hungry, and therefore can have an impact on that. It will obviously affect your concentration and your ability to learn, and whether that's as a child or an adult, you know, it's going to affect you at work or at school. So we know that this is a really important issue. It'll affect how you process information, how you form memories. Someone says they can't see any screen sharing. Is there any, if anyone else is having problems, please let us know in the chat and we'll try something else.
I can see your screen. I don't know if anyone else.
Try logging out and logging back in, Rihanna, and see if that helps. I don't know, but if anyone else is having trouble, just pop it in the chat for us so that we know if it's a widespread problem. Sorry about that. So yeah, sleep helps your immune system function properly, and it helps to reduce anxiety, and it can, you know, when we don't sleep, we get anxious, tired, grumpy, we get low, we get depressed. We can't function, can we? We all know what that's like. So people are saying other people can see, so that's great. Thank you. Oh, I can't go on to the next slide because I've changed. So I've just said this. So yeah, so poor concentration, low mood, anger and irritability, hyperactive behaviour and impaired performance at school. This sounds like something else, doesn't it? It sounds a bit like ADHD, which is something that we talk about a lot. at the moment, and I certainly see a lot of people coming into GP practice with concerns that their child might have ADHD. But it's bearing in mind that so sleep problems can mimic other things. So if a child isn't sleeping, they can appear hyperactive, they can appear irritable, poor concentration. But equally, children with ADHD have trouble sleeping. So it's a bit of a difficult one to decipher what's going on. How much sleep do children need? So this is from the Great Ormond Street Hospital website. They've got some good resources on their webpage about helping with sleep. And so thinking about the children we're talking about, if you're thinking sort of, you know, preschool to primary school, children need sort of 10 to 13 hours at 3 to 5 years. And then by 6 to 12 years, when they're in primary school, between 9 and 12 hours. That's quite a big range, isn't it? You know, so some kids do need that full 12 hours and some will only need 9. So it's thinking about your expectations of what you think your child needs, and what, you know, they certainly don't need as much as they were having when they were babies, and they certainly don't need naps by the time that they are getting into primary school. If they are needing naps, you need to sort of think about why that is. So if they're sleeping well at night and still needing naps, then that's perhaps a cause to have a chat with a medical professional about it. Teenagers, it says 8 to 10, but I think, you know, teenagers spend a lot of time in bed, don't they? And I think they need a lot more sleep than that. So, but that's the recommendation from Great Ormond Street. So let's think about the things that we need to do to help our children to sleep. And there are really, you know, it's going back, and a lot of the work I do as a GP, I just go back to basics with an awful lot of things. The lives we lead are so ridiculously busy. We are trying to look after the family, we're looking after the house, we're working, we're dealing with potentially other family members if they're unwell. Life is really, really chaotic and busy. And sometimes the basics in life we don't quite get right. And I know I'm certainly guilty of this myself. We don't always get the basics right. We don't always remember to do those things that we know actually deep down keep us really healthy. But this is just a prompt and a reminder of some of those things that are going to help you and your child. So exercise. And I put a picture of a dog. I'm not a dog person, but I popped a picture of a dog on here because I saw something really interesting on one of my social medias recently, and I get a lot of information about like children and children's well-being in my role, and it was an article by an occupational therapist, and they talked about the fact that we remember to walk our dogs every day, twice a day. So if you've got a dog, I mean, I don't, but do we walk our children twice a day? And that really made me think, because actually, what happens if you don't walk your dog? You know, the dog gets irritable, they start racing around, they get frustrated, they go a bit scatty, don't they? And they get really sad and they get quite down often. And I thought to myself, do we think about that for our children? People take their dogs out for a walk twice a day, hopefully, maybe 3 times, sometimes more. But do we always remember that our children need to get out twice a day? And that is something, again, myself as a parent, I know when I'm busy and I've been working, it's not always an easy thing to do, especially in the cold, in the winter. It's a difficult thing. People with dogs do it. And I'm not saying dogs and children are exactly the same, but it just struck me as a really interesting principle that we walk our dogs twice a day, because if we don't, we know what happens. And with our children, I think we need to think about things in the same way. So the government advice and you know, really children should be getting at least an hour of exercise a day. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be doing, you know, planned sports or, you know, go into a swimming pool. Exercise is playing for children. So playing outside, running around, kicking a football about, playing in the park, playing in the garden. Outside exercise is really important for children, their overall health and well-being. And it's an hour a day for kids. It's only, what do we say for adults? I think an hour 3 times a week. For adults, we get away with it a little bit more, but for children, they really should be exercising for an hour a day. And maybe is that, you know, that counts as walking to school, walking back from school. They do exercise at school, don't they? They run around in the playground. They have PE, but ideally we should be encouraging our kids to have an hour's exercise a day. That's really hard sometimes. I've got an 11-year-old and he's 11 going on 14. And what does he want to do all day? He wants to sit inside and play computer games. And it takes a lot for me to, get the energy to encourage him and to go outside. My other child loves playing outside. They're all so different, aren't they? But my eldest just doesn't really want to be outside, and I have to really push him, encourage him, because he's the one that struggles with his sleep. So getting children outside, walking, playing, doing stuff, it's good for us as well. It's good for us as grown-ups to be getting outside. And I'll talk a bit more about why being outside is the best thing. So exercising outside helps with exposure to natural light. So we know that is really important for our well-being. So natural light, sunlight is really important for us to get vitamin D. So vitamin D can only work in our bodies if we're exposed to sunlight. So in terms of our physical health, we need it for strong bones and strong muscles, but also the sunlight helps our circadian rhythms, and it helps our bodies to understand when it's time to be awake and when it's time to be asleep. So being outside in the daylight is really important. It's quite easy at this time of year when the weather's like this, isn't it? It's beautiful out there at the moment and we want to be outside. But in the winter, particularly when it's dark when you get up and dark when you come home, that feels almost impossible. And this is, kids do get that exposure outside at school, which is great. But it's important for us as parents to remember that outside of school time that we should be thinking about that as well. Having said that, you do have to think about the effect exercise can have. It gets lots of endorphins going. Often after you've exercised, you can feel quite wide awake. So the recommendation is that children do avoid doing sort of too much strenuous exercise a couple of hours before they go to bed. Now, that might be challenging for kids who do certain clubs or if they've got a football match or whatever, but that is the recommendation of how to help with sleep, is to avoid, it might be fine every now and then, but don't do frequent hard exercise in the 2 or 3 hours before you go to bed. So we've talked about exercise, but next I'm gonna think about food and drink, and this is I find this particularly interesting because I'm really sensitive to caffeine. I love a coffee in the morning. I love a Pepsi Max. I love other drinks are available. I love a drink with caffeine in it to help get me going in the morning. But I know if I have one after lunchtime, I am wide awake at night and I can't sleep. I recently went in to do a talk about sleep at my son's primary school, and I said to the kids, how many of you struggle to go to sleep? And loads of them put their hands up. And then I said to them, how many of you like to drink things like Coke Zero or Pepsi Max or other fizzy drinks? And loads of them put their hand up again. And I see a lot of children, out and about drinking various things. So fizzy drinks, whether they've got sugar in or not, a lot of them contain caffeine. And caffeine, we know, I'm sure most of you know this, caffeine keeps us awake. It is a stimulant. It was discovered, the way it was discovered is that, people found that eating the beans made them really lively and awake, and therefore we developed, started cultivating them, making coffee. So I see a lot of children, and the first question, when they have trouble sleeping, the first question I ask is about caffeine. And so, we're not just talking about these monster energy drinks where it's glaringly obvious that's going to keep you awake, but actually things like Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero. Yes, there's no sugar in those things, but they contain caffeine. Even Dr. Pepper, which I really like, which is a shame, contains quite a bit of caffeine. There's also evidence that the artificial sweeteners that are in the sugar-free options can affect your sleep as well. So if your children are regularly drinking these, and lots of kids love them, it's a nice treat, it's fun, and all of this is about doing stuff in moderation. I'm a parent, I know that it's real life is real life, and we all have treats and we all like things. But if you are really struggling with your child to get them to sleep, just stop fizzy drinks, because they can cause, even the ones that are sugar-free, even the ones that are caffeine-free, the sweeteners can have a big effect on how they sleep. So really try and avoid them. If it's absolutely impossible to stop, then after midday is better than nothing. But I see, lots of patients, and I've got friends as well who, you know, oh, my son's really struggling to sleep, and then he comes around my house and he's come around with a can of Coke Zero, and I'm sort of like, well, that's going to have an effect no matter what you do. So please really remember the impact of caffeine. We know that it's not just in coffee, tea, and fizzy drinks. Caffeine is also in things like chocolate. So, you know, we used to say to people, oh, have a hot chocolate before you go to bed. Really bad idea. Coffee, chocolate, cocoa, all contains caffeine, which can, you know, is a stimulant. It wakes our brains up. It makes us feel more awake and more alive. So really avoid caffeine. It lasts in our system. You know, the half-life of caffeine is 5 hours, which means it takes 5 hours for half of the caffeine you've had to get out of your body. So it lasts quite a long time. So do try and think about that. You know, are your children, things we do sometimes, you know, you might have like a treat, you might like have a chocolate yogurt or a chocolate mousse or something after dinner. Is that having an impact? Are they having, you know, again, my son who doesn't sleep well, he's a terror. I let him go around the shop on his own now because he's old enough. Goes round, he buys lots of chocolate, lots of sweets. That's going to be impacting on his sleep, and he's not old enough to make that decision and understand that himself. He should be starting to get it now at 11, but it's for us as parents, it's really hard to police this, but it is so important. If they're struggling to sleep and you're all at your wits' end, really think about that. The other thing to do is to really try and avoid eating your evening meal too close to bedtime, because heavy meals, you know, can wake your body up. You start to get that boost of, you know, all the sugars and the carbohydrates get into your system, and it, you know, your body thinks that's time to wake up and use that energy. So try and avoid having a really heavy meal, or your main evening meal too close to bedtime. You want to have it at least a couple of hours before that. And like I say, avoid sugary snacks and drinks. But some children, it is really helpful to have a sleepy snack before bed, because some children do get hungry and that wakes them at night. So think about what sort of snack they're going to have. So I give my son Weetabix, no sugar on it. He always asks for sugar on it and honey. No, it's bedtime. No, you know, just a bit of Weetabix with milk, because we know obviously milk can help, and it's a slow release carbohydrate, and that can help their little bodies and their tummies feel full and help them get to sleep. Things like bananas, porridge, cherries. I didn't realise cherries are really good at helping sleep until I was preparing this talk. So cherries and cereal, and then turkey. So we all know that kind of thing about having your Christmas dinner and then falling asleep. There's tryptophans in the turkey. There's actual chemicals that can aid sleep. So, I mean, I certainly don't give my son slices of turkey before bed, but I mean, it's something to consider if you're really struggling. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about bedroom environment and how that can impact on sleep. So, the bedroom environment, it's really hard, isn't it? Because kids' bedrooms are where they go to play, not just to go to sleep. You might share a bedroom with your sibling, you might share a bedroom with more than one sibling, or even with you know, your parents. It depends on your living situation. But we know that the bedroom environment can play a big part in how children sort of feel at bedtime, how they fall asleep. There's loads of stuff going on in the bedroom. If there's a TV in the corner, if there's a PlayStation, if there's you know, flashing things with flashing lights on them, or things that make noises, that's all distraction. That's all potentially going to affect people. Just to say, actually, I didn't say this at the beginning, but most of the advice I'm giving for children applies to adults as well. So just consider that if you yourself, or you know people who are having trouble sleeping. So a lot of the stuff I'm advising is really true for adults, and it can have an impact on them as well. So your bedroom environment should be very calm. It should be avoiding lots of flashing lights, you know, screens, all sorts of things like that. It's important, again, thinking about those circadian rhythms and how your body knows when it's time to go to sleep and wake up. It's about the light and the daylight. Understandably, we've evolved with a daytime and a nighttime, and our bodies have evolved to know when it's time to go to sleep and when it's time to wake up. And because of the way we live our lives and the way society is now, we've got lots of artificial light. We've got lots of times where we're not spending time outside. And so that really confuses our bodies and our brains. And we don't always know, you know, so that affects the way we go to sleep and how our brains understand when to go to sleep. So I'm coming on to night lights and being afraid of the dark. Don't worry, I should talk about that a little bit. The temperature of the bedroom is really important. And actually, it's probably, maybe a bit cooler than you think. When you have a baby, you're told to keep the baby's room at a certain temperature, aren't you? But it's true for kids, older kids as well. So 16 to 18 degrees, they say, is the optimum temperature. I tend to keep my heating quite low at night because I figure we've got loads of blankets. You can either put another blanket on or take it off rather than the room being too hot. So just think about the temperature of the room for your child. Another consideration is the bed full of toys, or are there clothes all piled up on it? Again, as a mum, I know what it's like. My sons want about 56 teddies in bed with them every night. And we have to really, I have to have this debate with them about which teddies are staying and which are not. But trying to keep too many toys out of the bed or away from the bed is really, really important. So noise can be a big factor, and that's often unavoidable. So if you live near a noisy road, or you've got other things going on in the house, or other siblings that go to bed at different times, that's going to be unavoidable. So there's different ways you can think about that. But some people use white noise just as a kind of low, really quiet background noise. That can sometimes just provide a little bit of like a kind of blanket over the noise that's external to help. I mean, I know for sure when my children were babies, we use white noise an awful lot, and it can be used and can be really useful for older children as well. So as I've said, distractions, lights, toys, screens, siblings. That's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if they share a room and one's older than the other, there's going to be that inevitable issue with bedtimes and getting one to sleep before the other. There's not really any science around that per se, but hopefully some of these other hints and tips will help get you through it. There's been a couple of questions about being scared of the dark, and it's normal. It's normal and natural to be scared of the dark. So again, when you're thinking about when our bodies were evolving, when we were cave people, I always think about the film The Croods. I don't know if any of you have seen The Croods. I don't know if it's a Disney film or it's one of those cartoons. It's a film about they're all cave people. It's a nice cartoon film about that, and they're all scared of the dark, and they all sleep together in a big huddle. And if you think about it, the reason they're scared of the dark is because there are lots of predators at night. There's things that could have come and get them. And as we evolved to be really wary that if I go to sleep, and it's dark and I can't see, there might be a tiger or a fox or a wolf out there. And that's how our brains evolved, thousands of years ago, to be really wary at night. And for children, it was a survival technique. Actually, if you were in the dark and on your own, you would be scared and that's a good thing, because then you'd go and sit next to your parent and sleep next to your parent, because you'd be safe because they could protect you. We don't have to worry about wolves and saber-toothed tigers now, but those ingrained things that we've evolved with are still there. So this is why children can be so scared of the dark, and they can be really scared of being on their own. So it's not abnormal. It is normal for children to feel these things. And I think through things like the way society's changed through the Industrial Revolution and the way we've changed how we live, we've adapted a lifestyle where parents sleep in one room and children sleep separately in their own rooms. And that, as a parent, I find that as an interesting concept. For sure, my son finds it really hard in the dark. He finds it really hard to be on his own. We'll come on to that in a little while. But night lights are absolutely perfect. They have the right sort of frequency of light. That means it's not the sort that keeps your brain awake and active. It's the blue light often in artificial lights and in screens that can be the problem. So having a night light is fine. It's great. If that's what helps your child to sleep, go for it. Keep going with it. Okay. I've talked through some of this already, but you may, and we'll talk a bit more about melatonin as the medicine at the very end, but natural melatonin. So melatonin is a natural hormone that our bodies produce that tells us to go to sleep. And as I say, when we are, living our very busy modern lifestyles and we're not getting outside as much as we should and getting natural light, and when we are in you know, perhaps when we are inside, we are exposed to artificial light a lot and screens a lot. Our brains get really confused. They don't know when it's day and night, and the melatonin production shifts, and that can often be a big factor. So this is why I've been really going on about getting outside, getting natural light in the daytime, you know, in the morning, opening the curtains wide, letting the sunlight flood in. So your body and your brain and all the chemicals in your body are like, right, daytime now, time to wake up. We need our body to get into that rhythm so that we know when it's day and when it's night, and the brain clicks into gear. We produce some melatonin and it helps us fall asleep. So as I've said, we've just talked about this with one of the questions. It's about you know, complete darkness. It's a survival technique. We evolved to have that fear, and it is quite normal and natural, and it is something that children do find easier as they get older. Although even some adults don't like sleeping in complete darkness, and some adults don't like, you know, they have a night light or a light on the landing. I mean, that's what we do in our house. So dim night lights are absolutely fine, and natural daylight, it really is the best medicine for so many things. And I talk to my patients, both adults and children, if they are anxious, if they are low in mood, if they are suffering with depression. One of the very first things I talk to them about is getting outside, getting natural light, because it will impact on your body and have a really beneficial effect. Screen time. So we all talk about screen time a lot, and you know, there's various thoughts about it and things, but there's actual science out there. And there's lots of ongoing science, because we've only had screens available to us, you know, en masse for a few years really, and the science hasn't had time to do lots and lots of robust research. But there is some evidence that if you use screens before you go to bed, it can double the length of time it takes for you to fall asleep. Okay, and again, that's true for adults and for children, so it's not just the kids. And if you're anything like me, you're probably sitting there thinking, yeah, well, I sit on my phone. I love a little scroll in the evening. I like to have a look through the socials, see what's going on. That can feel like your downtime. And if it doesn't affect your sleep, that's absolutely fine. But if you are someone who is struggling to sleep, being on your phone, being on an iPad, even TV sometimes can be a problem. We know that. One of our local paediatricians has put together some advice for families and children about safe screen time, because we know that it's not just the effect it has on sleep, but using screens too much can affect lots of other things. So it can affect your mood, it can affect your levels of anxiety, and obviously being on a screen, you're not active, you're not exercising, so you're not getting that exercise that aids sleep. You're not outside in the fresh air in the sunlight. Again, that's the issue as well. So there's quite a lot of resources I'm talking about here today that will be available. I'm sure we can make them available to you, perhaps email them out or something, because there's loads of really valuable stuff out there to look at and think about. With screens, ideally the recommendation is no screens at all for an hour before bed. That can be really, again, I'm human. I love snuggling up on the sofa in the evening with my kids watching a film. That's what we love to do. And you know, when you think to yourself, well, an hour before bed, that's really, really hard. But if you are one of those families that's really struggling and the lack of sleep is overtaking your life, you've got to weigh up what's more important. So think about avoiding screens an hour before bed. The things that, you know, that screens are great. Kids learn a lot from screens. My kids come out with things and I'm like, where did you hear that? Oh, I heard about it on YouTube Kids, by the way. I don't let them just have free reign. They learn loads of stuff. They can socialize, they can play games with their friends. There's a big place for screens, like they do their homework on them. My son does, he makes stopgap animations, he does videos. There's loads of really creative stuff and fun stuff and learning you can do with screens. So screens are not all bad, but something I heard somewhere, somebody said that screen time is like brain candy. I mean, it obviously was an American, so it's like sweets for the brain. we can, and the thing with sweets is they're okay in moderation. It's okay to have sweets every now and then as a treat and for a bit of fun. But actually, if you're having, if you're having sweets constantly all day, every day, we know that's going to be bad for us, right? So it's the same with screen time. Screens have definitely got a place. For a lot of kids, it helps them regulate. It helps them just to zone out if they've had a busy, hard day. I mean, same for us adults, right? We I like to have a little scroll and look at things when I'm trying to just chill out after a busy day. But there is evidence, there's science that tells us that too much screen time can have a big effect, okay? So the recommendation for children in the age group we're talking about, primary school age, 6 to 10 years, less than 2 hours a day during the week, and then 2 to 3 hours at the weekend. That can be like a massive battle. I'm totally aware of that. With my children, one of the main things we argue about is screen time. I've put an app on their tablets, which means that I can control how long they can be on their tablets for, and it turns them off at a certain time of night, and it won't turn them on again till a certain time in the morning. So there is an app, I think it's called Family Link. There's various apps out there where you can control your children's, and it's about having that conversation with them about, not don't have the conversation as you've just told them to come off the iPad or the computer game, because they'll be angry and they'll be cross. But when in the cold light of day, when everyone's calm and you're just all having a chat, say, I know you really love playing on that game. I know you love it. It's great and it's really fun and you're really good at it. But it's not good to be on it all the time. And I really think we should come up with a plan to limit the time that you're on there. I mean, what I do with my children sometimes is I do use screen time as a reward if they've done something really well, because I know they value it so much. But they know that they have a limit, and that if they exceed that limit, it just switches off. So it's having that understanding. But I'm not saying it's easy. And I know some of you would think this is impossible. This won't happen in my house. But it's just having to think about how to make it work for you. Having a routine is really vital. And we know, don't we, if we go abroad somewhere in a different time zone, we get jet lagged. If we have a series of late nights, we know how it affects us. So routine, our bodies need routine to be able to maintain, knowing when to be awake and when to be asleep. So again, this can be really tough because we all have lives to live. Sometimes we want to go out, we want to go to a party with a friend or someone's house, or we want to stay up late. And that's okay every now and then, but just be mindful that it will affect your children's sleep, for a few days afterwards. So you have to kind of acknowledge the price. I always think to myself, it's the price I have to pay for doing this thing, is that I know that I'm going to really struggle to get my eldest to go to sleep for a few days afterwards. But we've all had fun, and they've been able to spend time with their friends or with their cousins or whatever. But it is a bit of a weighing up the price you have to pay for that. So stick to the same sleep time, going to bed time and waking up time every day, even at weekends. And that's like, oh no, that's the time we all want to lie in, isn't it? But if we have that lie in and then the sleep cycle changes come Monday morning, it's hard to get up, and then it's hard to go back to sleep again. So again, you're all here because you want to find out about sleep. If you're struggling, if your children are not going to sleep very easily, one of the hardest things, but you've got to stick to a routine. You've got to stick to having a really rigid time to go to bed and time to wake up. And with that, you need to have a routine where you start to get ready for bed. So your brain you start to tell your brain, right, it's time to start getting ready for sleep. So you're starting to prepare your body for bedtime. So it's no good to just, I'm sure we all know this. If you've been racing around all day and then you suddenly get into bed and you're just wide awake. We have to wind down. Our bodies and our brains have to gradually wind down and prepare for sleep. So you need to be ideally in the dark, I walk around at sort of 6:30, start shutting all the curtains at this time of year because it's light, but start shutting the curtains, making it dim in the lights with a proper lamp on. Start a routine before bed. So we know we've already talked about no screens for an hour before bedtime. Choose calm activities if you can, so play, just letting them play with toys, play with Lego, doing a jigsaw, Reading's great if they will read, but again, perhaps some of you are thinking, I can't get, my kid won't do that. But just pick something they like, is it Pokemon cards? Is it, I mean, you can tell I've got boys because it's all Pokemon and Minecraft in my house. But what is it they would like to do? And what they probably would really love is doing it with you. And again, I'm guilty of this because I'm busy at work and I'm busy. I get home and I'm making the tea and I've got to put the wash on and take the wash off and do all these things. But actually sitting down and just having that little bit of time together can be really important. Some people talk about having a bath before bed or a shower. Just again, it's part of that routine, so you start to acknowledge that this is the body and the brain. It's like you're not tricking your brain, but you're telling your brain it's that time. It's time to start getting ready. And as I said before, I mean, certainly in our house, they have a snack before bed. They have Weetabix before bed because they're growing and they get hungry just before bedtime and it helps them to sleep. So not every child needs that or wants that. And you've got to remember, in terms of their overall calorie intake, that impact. So having something that's not sugary, not sweet, no chocolate in it, that's the way to go. So again, I'm realistic about this. This is really hard. Routine is really difficult and it takes hard work and determination. It's not going to change overnight. You're not going to see a difference in one night or 2 nights. It's going to take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks sometimes to get this. It's about trying to plan this together as a family and stick with it and have an agreement with your kids that you're going to try these things. The real key with children is that they absolutely thrive on praise. So really praise them and recognise when they do things well. If they sleep in their own bed, if they go to bed well, if they're playing really nicely, just praise them. Try not to focus on the negatives, but stick with the positives. We know, again, like the psychologists have studied it, that if you praise a child, their behavior is way more likely to change than if you if you are angry with them and cross and tell them off. So anxiety at bedtime, and I guess this might be something that some of you come across. And again, I mean, this comes from the heart because this is my son always thinks it's the time he wants to get all his worries out, and he suddenly wants to debrief his entire day with me at bedtime. And it's hard to know whether that's a stalling technique or whether it is actually just because that's the time we're together, just the two of us, and it's really quiet and it's calm and there's no distractions, and that's the time he can feel, he can let that out. So often that's probably more the case than it being a stalling technique. So it's sometimes important to let your child have a bit of time with you, one-on-one, perhaps in the hour before bed where to let your worries out, to have a talk about, well, what's happened that day, something happened in the playground, or didn't get all your spellings right, or, you're worried or you're anxious about something. So set aside a bit of time within that wind down time as worry time to let those worries out. Some psychologists and therapists advise writing down your worries and popping them in a worry box so that they're down and they're out of your brain, they're on paper and they're put away in a box. There's lots of different things that can help for children with anxiety and things you've probably heard of these things, but mindfulness, just being aware of the world around you. Just if children are getting really anxious and worried, talking about, well, what are 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, what can you feel? Mindfulness can be really helpful, and sometimes just slowing children's breathing down and taking time to take deep breaths in and out. I'm not a great one to talk about this, and it's really ironic, I think, that I am doing this talk, to be honest, because I do often sleep with my child because he requires that to fall asleep and to stay asleep, and that is an individual parental decision, I think, for us to make that call, and whatever gets us through the night, I think, is sometimes actually the answer I give to parents, is whatever gets you all through the night, allows you to be rested and allows you to function in the day. As I've said, stay positive, rewards, praise. Some people will say things like sticker charts. If you have a great night, pop a sticker on it. I'm rubbish with sticker charts. I can't remember to do them and I'm not consistent. So they don't work for everyone, but they do work for some people. So think about that. And just focus again, if they're getting worried, talk about all the happy things that have happened that day. And that's good for us as well. It's a bit, like that kind of gratitude thing, like sometimes the world can be overwhelming and we can focus on the negatives, but focusing on 3 things that are nice that have happened to you today. Just going to mention briefly about children with special educational needs, because that again, we could talk about that for an entire day's conference really, but we know that it's much more common for children with special educational needs to have sleep difficulties. All of the stuff I've talked about in this talk, you can apply to children who have special educational needs, and that is the first thing that any medical professional will advise for children, is to follow the steps that I've said in this talk. The sleep charity website, I would urge you to look at if you haven't. Have a look at that website, and there's some more websites I'll direct you to at the end. They've got some really great advice about how to help sleeping children, and particularly a page about children with special educational needs. And if you look at that, actually, they talk about things like melatonin production with screens, how it can affect things, having exercise, looking at your child's diet. Often things for children with special needs, like a visual timetable. So actually a timetable to remind you that when it's bedtime, this is what we do. So putting it into steps of, so at bedtime, so we go upstairs at this time, then what do we do? So maybe we do a jigsaw for a bit, we read a book, we brush our teeth, then we get into bed. And sometimes having pictures to just remind children to have that, especially if they struggle with their executive function, with their planning and their short-term memory, to have that planner. I mean, we use a planner for my son in the morning to help him remember what he needs to do to get ready for school, because we'd had so many mornings of me shouting and getting angry that it wasn't happening. I've talked about melatonin, so it's the natural hormone that helps us fall asleep. Well, our bodies produce it naturally, and it's helped by darkness at bedtime and natural light in the day. So getting outside, remember that. Some of you, I'm sure many of you may have heard about melatonin medication. That's something that is used kind of very much as a last resort, very much only prescribed by specialists. So GPs can't prescribe this medication. We're not allowed to. It has to be prescribed by a specialist, but only when all the other interventions have been tried and they've not worked, and when they've been tried for quite some time as well. So that is something to just remember. And there's a variety of things to do with sleep. And again, I can't cover them all today because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. But if you, children may have trouble with night terrors, things like restless legs, teeth grinding, or sleepwalking. The advice I've given today, that's the first line treatment for all of those things. So those things can be helped by all of the sleep hygiene measures and the advice that I've given. Abnormal breathing patterns I'll just mention slightly separately, because if you do notice, so you may have heard of sleep apnea. Often we think about that happening in older people, but children can get sleep apnea too. So if you notice a strange breathing pattern in your child, particularly if you notice that, we all stop breathing momentarily when we're asleep because everything slows down a lot. But if your child stops breathing for a number of seconds, if they snore loudly, particularly if your child is really sleepy and tired in the day and finding it difficult to function, that could be signs of sleep apnea. So it's worth going and having a chat with a medical professional, so your GP or one of the clinicians at your local practice. So just to summarise, I've talked about the importance of exercise, particularly getting outside and exercising. The things you have to think about with food and drink, caffeine, just avoid it. I mean, I literally wouldn't give kids caffeine at all, ideally, if you're struggling with their sleep, and avoid sweeteners and too much sugar as well. Make the environment calm. Try and avoid too many teddies in the bed, too many flashing lights in the room, and keep it at a cool temperature and nice and dark. Keep a routine, keep a regular routine, and try and manage and recognise any anxiety. Don't get cross with them. Their worries are coming out of bedtime. That's quite natural. Have time earlier on in the day where it's quiet, where it's one-on-one, where they can talk about it, because otherwise bedtime's the only time they get you to themselves and they can let those worries out. As I've said, the Sleep Charity org UK is a really good website to look at. As well as locally, we've got the Health for Kids website, which is one has local advice and signposting as well. So as well as Great Ormond Street Hospital, the Sheffield Children's Hospital has also got some really good advice and support on sleep. So have a look at those resources. as well, and even locally. So our own Dr. Imad Ahmed, who's on the call, who's going to hopefully help me with some questions shortly, has produced a sleep leaflet that they use in the specialist sleep clinic, which again, I got a lot of the information I've given you today from this leaflet. So actually this is stuff that the sleep specialists tell people in clinics, that it is going back to these basic things and remembering to do these and to stick to routine. Feel like I've talked an awful lot there. Hopefully there's been some little glimmers of help, that I've told you something you don't know. We're going to have a little bit of time for questions now. So Jacob, do you want to just go through, if anyone's got, I think can we do hands up if people want to ask? We can also go through the chat as well.
Yep, should we start with the chat? So we've got a couple of questions around, well, one question is around, is it okay to let their child sleep on a hard floor? It's pretty much the only way the child will sleep. And another question is around letting your kid sort of come into your bed in the middle of the night, and is it okay just to let them sleep in your bed for a while, because we all know it's quite difficult.
Oh, we've got someone's unmuted, I think, but if you stay muted because we're getting a little bit of time. So if he sleeps, I mean, Imad, do come in on this. I'll stop sharing my screen and then you can perhaps all see better. But if that's where he wants to sleep and that's where he sleeps, and you've tried putting a little, I don't know, like a camping mat or a sleeping bag or something underneath, and he shuffles off it. My feeling is if a child sleeps, let them sleep, unless they're in danger or going to get hurt in some way. If he won't go to sleep in bed and he likes sleeping on the floor, often that could be like a sensory thing, that they like that feeling. And I think children, I mean, I remember going camping as a child and being fine. And now if I go camping and I sleep on the floor, your body aches, doesn't it? I think it's really different when you're a child sleeping on a hard floor. You don't have that, the same problems with it. So, but Imad, I don't know if you're there and have any comments about that.
Yeah, I think thanks, Louise. Just from the sleep sleep clinic point of view, I think what we do advise is that if the child is quite comfortable sleeping on the hard floor, that is fine for a short period of time. Prolonged, if a child is used to sleeping on the hard floor and does this for a prolonged periods of time, like months, I think that can cause occasionally joint discomfort, which in turn can impact the quality of sleep for the child. What we do advise from our clinic is to use a firm but padded sleep mat, and we have also advised the Japanese style futon beds. I think if you have a look on the internet, those are quite comfortable for children who like to sleep on the floor. And to still focus on the sleep hygiene, that is the same bedtime routine, dim light, etc., that Louise has spoken during the session.
Brilliant, that's great. So I mean, this is so we talked about the hard floor. What time is best for a child to sleep in the day? So we're talking this talk has been about children who are in primary school. So primary school children shouldn't really need to sleep in the day. I mean, when they're in reception, I think when they start school and they're in reception and they start, and they realise what a busy day they've had. I know that some children will still have naps at that time, but really when they're sort of over the age of five or six, they shouldn't necessarily need a nap during the day. There may be some children perhaps with disabilities or special educational needs that might be different for, but ideally it's thinking about how many hours you want the child to sleep for, like that graph said, sort of 9 to 12 hours sleep they need. So it's thinking about a bedtime that works for you depending on when you've got to get up in the morning. So if you've got to get up in the morning, at 6, you're going to have to put them to bed at 9 potentially, or earlier than that. So it's thinking about what time works for you. My son will get into my bed while I'm sleeping. If I try to put him back in his bed, it causes less sleep for all of us, and I let him stay. I mean, I could have written that because that's what happens in my house an awful lot. My philosophy is if we're sleeping and we're happy, that's great, because I find that I'm often too exhausted to keep putting my son back to bed. I will ask Imad what the sleep clinic advice is, because he's like I say, a sleep consultant, a specialist in sleep for children. I'm perhaps giving the I'm giving the GP/mummy view on this, but what would you advise if children repeatedly keep getting out of bed into parents' beds?
I think,
Imad?
thanks, Louise. The main thing is to consider the behavioral sleep strategies that we advise. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So the first thing is obviously the gradual extinction, which we advise multiple strategies that can include the starting with a calm and predictable bedtime routine and keeping consistency. We advise the camp out method, where I think it's a gradual way to transition the child to their own bed without too much stress over a period of about 2 to 3 weeks. And positive reinforcement, I think that is quite important. I think it's a balance. We need to create a gradual transition, but create a safe, comforting environment and not leave it too long, because sometimes what happens is if children are quite anxious when transitioning, a bad experience might put them back a few times, put them back to square one. So I think whatever strategy we think as a family can work, we need to choose this for a few weeks, and sudden changes should be avoided. But I think we need to support children having independent sleep routines, at least in primary school age group. Going back to the previous question about daytime sleepiness, daytime naps after the age of 5 needs to be looked at unless children have additional medical conditions. So if the child is otherwise well and is needing daytime naps, I think we really need to look at the sleep quality, and further evaluation might be needed.
So in that case, I guess go and speak to your GP and have a chat about that, because it might be that that things need to be looked into. I think when you're trying to start one of these routines, it's doing it at the right time for you as a family. So not when you've got loads of busy stuff going on, not just before SATs, or just when there's other things going on in life. So pick a good time that works for you when you're going to have the energy to do it consistently. And so when there's a time when things aren't super busy, and if it's maybe a week where you've got some annual leave, or you're all off, they're off school and you're off work and you're at home, that's probably the perfect time to do it, rather than a time when you're all exhausted, you're all busy, all trying to do it and get it done. But it's worth doing it in a planned kind of way. Questions about magnesium, Imad. A few people have asked about that. What are your thoughts about magnesium?
No, I think there is no evidence that magnesium supplements are usually helping in good sleep, although I think there is no research evidence as such.
I don't think it does any harm if they're specific children's supplements. They it's like a lot of vitamins and minerals. There's not always definite evidence that you need that with a varied diet.
I think from an overall health point of view, it is fine.
Spend your money.
From an overall health, it's fine, I think. But for sleep per se, I think magnesium supplements may not be that helpful, and you may not see the response that is expected from the sleep quality point of view.
And then we have to go for the last question, I guess, because we're coming up to time. But about teeth grinding, I mean, the first step is, as we've said in this webinar, that all the sleep hygiene advice that we've talked about to have the routine, do the exercise in the day, the diet, all of those things are really important to help as a first step. Are there any other things that you can advise, Imad, about teeth grinding for children?
So teeth grinding is not very uncommon, and it can be because of various issues. So it can be because of teething and growing pains, particularly in toddlers and younger children. In older children, it can be sign of anxiety as well. And children with teeth grinding or bruxism can also have associated sleep disorders like sleep apnea. So I think the suggestion is to usually look at what type, is that a constant thing throughout the night, or is it just happening when the child is falling asleep? And to manage this, I think, as you have highlighted, Louise, in your session, I think things like consistent bedtime routine, techniques like deep breathing, relaxation exercises prior to falling asleep, those simple things can possibly help. However, if they are not helping, I think a dental checkup will be quite helpful to see if mouth guards may be needed, or if there is a teeth alignment issue. Very importantly, avoiding food or drinks with caffeine in the afternoon or evening, because there is enough evidence that this can contribute to teeth grinding, as well as I think progressive muscle relaxation or a warm bath before bed usually can help if there are no other associated issues.
I mean, you probably find that if there has been something stressful, or that I think we all grind our teeth now and then, that it can be just sort of a normal thing that happens intermittently. But if it is really regular, then as Imad has said, to seek that help. I think we're probably going to have to finish it there because we're at time now, aren't we, Jacob?
We are, and I'd just like to say thank you, Louise, for giving us some very insightful and interesting information, and I really hope that it helps. There's definitely some things that I'm going to be implementing into my child's daily routine. But thank you very much, Louise, and also Imad for coming in with your comments as well. So yeah, and thank you for everybody for coming along to this webinar this evening. We would love to hear your feedback about today's webinar. So there is a really short survey, which would be amazing if you could complete that. I will send out an email tomorrow, and it will also have the survey in it, but it will also have a recording of today's presentation and some of those links that Louise mentioned earlier on about the sleep charity and Health for Kids. And also I will make a certificate for everybody who attended as well. So so a bonus for everybody as well there. One final thing to mention is, so we're hoping to have a bit of a series of webinars that can help help parents and carers with their children. And we have another one coming up in May. It's going to be May the 15th from about 5 p.m. and it is going to be about screen time. So it's titled Screendemic. So you'll find out some tips from one of our doctors around how to support your children getting off of screens and things like that. But yeah, once again, just really like to thank Louise for her time and her knowledge. And thank you everybody again for turning up tonight.
Thanks everyone. Have a good evening. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.